Hey guys, how's it going? Hope you're doing well. My name is Crown, and today I'm going to read you some very interesting stories that I hope that you're gonna love. And now, without further ado, let's go!
My neighbor moved in about 6 months after I did. From day one, she made it clear that she didn't care about anyone but herself. It started small, playing music loud enough to rattle my windows at midnight on weeknights, letting her dog do its business on my lawn without cleaning it up, and parking her beat-up sedan in ways that blocked half my driveway. I tried talking to her nicely several times, even brought over cookies once to try and start fresh. Nothing worked. The woman had a knack for doing everything possible to make my life miserable. She'd rev her engine at 5 in the morning when leaving for work, knowing I worked late shifts and needed sleep. She'd throw parties on random Tuesday nights with people yelling in her backyard until 3 in the morning. When I politely asked her to keep it down, she'd just laugh and slam the door in my face. But here's where things get interesting. About 2 weeks ago, I was going through the repo list for the day when I saw a familiar address. My address? Well, the house next door to mine. I double-checked the paperwork, and sure enough, my nightmare neighbor had defaulted on her car loan payments. 3 months behind, no contact with the lender, and now her car was scheduled for repossession. I'll admit part of me felt a little satisfaction seeing her name on that list. After months of dealing with her entitled behavior, karma seemed to be catching up. But I'm professional about my work. Personal feelings don't matter when you have a job to do. The morning I showed up to do the repo, I made sure I had all my paperwork in order. Legal documents, authorization from the lender, everything by the book. I parked my tow truck on the street and walked up to her front door, mentally preparing myself for what I knew wouldn't be a pleasant conversation. I knocked 3 times before she answered, looking annoyed as usual. I told her we needed to talk. She immediately got defensive and asked what I wanted now, clearly irritated by my presence. I kept my voice calm and explained that I was there to tell her about the repossession of her car due to her defaulted loan payments. She stared at me for a full 10 seconds, her face going through about 5 different expressions before settling on pure rage. She started yelling about how I had nerve and that it was her car and I wasn't taking it. I tried to explain that she hadn't made a payment in 3 months and that the lender had every legal right to repossess the vehicle. She screamed that she didn't care what some paper said and accused me of doing this just because I didn't like her. I assured her this had nothing to do with personal feelings and that I was just doing my job. I suggested she could contact her lender to work out a payment arrangement to resolve this without conflict. She told me to get off her property right now and slammed the door so hard it shook the frame. I stood there for a moment, then walked back to my truck to prepare the tow equipment. This wasn't my first hostile repo, and I knew she'd probably come back out to yell some more. What I didn't expect was what happened next. I was hooking up the chains when I heard her front door open again. I looked up and froze. She was standing on her porch, pointing a gun directly at me. My hands went up automatically. I immediately told her to put the gun down and that we could resolve this peacefully. She was shaking and yelling that I wasn't taking her car and demanding I get away from it right now. I tried to calm her down, explaining that this was just about a car loan and wasn't worth this kind of escalation. She kept screaming for me to get away from her car. Her hands were shaking and I could see she was scared and desperate. That made her even more dangerous. I slowly backed away from the vehicle, keeping my hands visible. I told her I was backing away and pleaded with her to put the gun down so we could talk about this. She shouted that there was nothing to talk about and ordered me to leave her property immediately. I retreated to what I hoped was a safe distance and immediately called 911. My heart was pounding when I explained the situation to the dispatcher. Within what felt like seconds, I could hear sirens in the distance. The first police car arrived within 3 minutes, followed quickly by 2 more. Officers quickly took positions behind their vehicles and started trying to communicate with her. She was still on her porch, still holding the gun, but at least it wasn't pointed at anyone anymore. One of the officers approached me to get my statement while others worked on talking her down. I explained about the repossession, showed them my paperwork, and described exactly what had happened. They assured me I'd done everything correctly and that pointing a weapon at someone performing legal duties was a serious crime. It took almost an hour, but they finally convinced her to put the gun down and surrender. When they handcuffed her, she was still screaming about how unfair everything was and how she was the victim in all this. The arresting officer told her she was under arrest for assault with a deadly weapon and threatening with a firearm. Even when they read her rights, she kept protesting that this was ridiculous and claiming I was stealing her car. The officer calmly explained that I had legal authorization to repossess the vehicle and that she'd have her chance to explain her side to a judge. The whole neighborhood had come out to watch by this point. People were shocked, apparently. They'd had their own issues with her but never imagined it would escalate to this level. After she was taken away, I finished the repo job. The car was in worse shape than the paperwork indicated, with dents and scratches that suggested she'd been careless with her vehicle. The court proceedings moved pretty quickly. Turns out the gun wasn't even registered, which added another charge. Her lawyer tried to argue that she was just defending her property, but pointing an unregistered weapon at someone legally repossessing a vehicle didn't hold up in court. The judge sentenced her to 18 months in prison. The neighborhood has been peaceful ever since. People actually seem relieved, and a few neighbors have mentioned that they'd been dealing with problems from her too but were afraid to complain. A young couple with a baby moved into her house last month, and they've been nothing but friendly. I started working at this Japanese import store during my junior year of high school. The job was a way to make some extra cash while I figured out what I wanted to do with my life. All those hours I spent doodling in my notebooks actually meant something. I ended up majoring in art with a focus on cartoons and animation when I got to college. The flexible schedule at the store let me keep working while I studied, which was perfect since college isn't exactly cheap. Our store specializes in authentic Japanese imports, everything from quirky gadgets and toys to high-end electronics. Most of our stuff is reasonably priced because we order in bulk, but sometimes we get these really premium items that cost us a fortune to import. When that happens, we have to mark them up significantly just to break even. It's basic business, but some customers don't seem to understand that. The day this whole mess went down, I was having a pretty typical shift. It was a Wednesday afternoon, slow enough that I could work on some character sketches while waiting for customers. I had my sketch pad propped up behind the register, working on this cartoon robot design for one of my animation classes. The store was quiet except for the soft Japanese pop music we always had, playing in the background. That's when she walked in. I could tell from the moment this woman entered that she was going to be trouble. She had this entitled swagger, dressed in what looked like expensive clothes that somehow managed to look cheap on her. Behind her trailed this kid who couldn't have been older than 12, but he was already showing all the signs of being a spoiled brat. He was wearing one of those anime shirts with some overly sexualized character on it, and he kept whining about wanting to look at the cool robots. They made their way straight to our premium display case at the back of the store. This is where we keep our high-end model kits and collectibles, the stuff that serious collectors come looking for. The kid immediately pressed his face against the glass, leaving smudges everywhere. The kid started begging his mom to look at the metallic unicorn Gundam, asking if he could get it and saying please over and over. His mother told him they would see and that she needed to look at the prices first. I watched them from my register when they spent about 10 minutes arguing over which kit to get. The kid kept pointing at different ones, each more expensive than the last. Finally, they seemed to settle on the premium unicorn Gundam kit, the one with the special metallic gold plastic that makes it look like actual metal when it's built. It's a beautiful kit, but it costs us almost $30 just to import each one. They approached my register and I put away my sketch pad to help them. The woman politely told me they wanted to purchase the toy. I said sure and told her I would scan it for them. I took the box and ran it under the scanner. Immediately I knew something was wrong. The screen showed $15, but I knew for a fact that this particular kit should be $40. I double-checked the box, looking at the model number and comparing it to what was on the screen. The woman started getting impatient, asking what was taking so long. She mentioned it was her son's birthday, and she didn't want to ruin it for him. I apologized and explained that the product had the wrong price tag. I told her it was coming up when $15 instead of $40. She dismissed my concern, saying it was just a toy and wasn't worth much. She told me to just go with the current price that showed up. I explained that I couldn't do that because I would get fired if I sold it at the wrong price. I also mentioned that she might get in trouble too once my manager found out about the pricing error. The kid immediately started having a meltdown. He cried to his mom that he wanted the cool robot and reminded her that she had promised. His mother snapped at him to shut up, calling him sweetie, but then saying that mommy was talking to the big greedy man. I could feel my patience wearing thin. This woman just called me greedy for trying to do my job correctly, and now she was being rude to her own kid. I decided I needed to prove that the scanner was wrong, so I walked over to the display case and grabbed an identical box from the shelf. I scanned it right in front of them. $40. Just like I thought. I showed them that the identical box scanned correctly at $40. I explained that the box they picked up must have had a damaged barcode or something. That's when she completely lost it. She started screaming at me, calling me every name in the book. Some of the things she said were so offensive I won't even repeat them here. She accused me of trying to scam her, of being racist against her and her son, of deliberately trying to ruin her kid's birthday. The whole time her son was standing there crying and demanding his robot. She called me a piece of trash and yelled that I was ruining her little boy's special day. She said she just wanted to buy him a cool toy that he actually wanted. At this point, I'd had enough. I sat back down in my chair, put in my earbuds, and cranked up my music. I wasn't going to stand there and be verbally abused by some entitled customer over a pricing error that wasn't even my fault. I could see her mouth moving, probably still yelling at me, but I just ignored her completely. After a few more minutes of her tantrum, she grabbed her kid and walked off toward the back of the store again. I figured they were either going to pick out something cheaper or just leave empty-handed. I went back to my sketching, thinking the drama was over. About 5 minutes later, I saw them heading for the exit. The kid was clutching something against his chest, trying to hide it under his jacket. They walked past my register without saying a word, heading straight for the door. The second they crossed the threshold, our security alarm went off. The loud beeping filled the store and I could see them freeze in panic. I heard the mother yell at her kid to run, just run, but it was too late. Our manager had heard the alarm from the back office and came running out. The police station was only 2 blocks away and we had their number on speed dial for situations exactly like this. Within minutes, 2 officers arrived at the store. I watched through the window when they were questioned outside. The kid was crying again, but this time, it wasn't because he couldn't have his toy. It was because he was about to learn a very expensive lesson about the results of stealing. The officers searched their bag and found the Gundam kit, still in its box, along with a few other smaller items they'd apparently grabbed on their way out. My manager asked if they had given me any trouble before the theft attempt. I told him that the mom had spent about 10 minutes screaming at me because she didn't want to pay the correct price for that kit. He shook his head and said, "It figured." He mentioned that some people think they can just take whatever they want if they throw a big enough fit. I never found out exactly what happened to them after that. I assumed they were arrested, and I know for sure they were banned from the store because I never saw them again. We've always gotten along well, rotating hosting duties for holidays and special occasions. Our kids play together and we genuinely enjoy each other's company. At least, that's what I thought until this past July 4th weekend. A few months ago, one of the families in our group volunteered to dog sit for a friend who was traveling for a month. They have a 9-year-old son who's been begging for a pet, and they figured this would be good practice before actually adopting a dog. The dog they were watching was a medium-sized mixed breed, energetic and friendly enough, but clearly not fully trained. About 2 weeks before the July 4th weekend, we were planning our usual get-together in our group chat. Originally, another family was supposed to host, since they have the biggest living room and their house works well for our gatherings. But then the dog-sitting family chimed in with a suggestion that changed everything. The dog-sitting mom mentioned in the chat that they would probably bring the dog to the party since he'd been cooped up lately and could use some socialization. Her husband then suggested that since they were bringing the dog, maybe it would be better if we move the party to someone's house with a backyard where the dog would have more space to run around. Of course, my wife and I are the only ones in the group with a decent-sized backyard. I could feel the pressure building through the screen. The dog-sitting mom quickly chimed in that our place would be perfect, explaining how the dog could play outside while we hung out inside. She asked what we thought about the idea. My wife and I exchanged looks. We didn't really want to host, especially with a dog we didn't know, but we also didn't want to seem difficult or petty in front of our friends. I reluctantly agreed but made it clear that I wanted the dog to stay mostly in the backyard. The dog-sitting dad assured me that was the whole point and thanked us for being flexible. I should have trusted my gut and said no. The day of the party arrived and our other friends showed up first. We were setting up snacks and drinks when the dog-sitting family arrived. The moment they walked in, I could tell this wasn't going to go as planned. The dog was pulling on its leash, clearly excited and overstimulated. When the dog-sitting dad asked where they should put the dog, I directed them to the backyard where there was plenty of space. They let the dog into the backyard, and initially everything seemed fine. All the kids, including my 8-year-old son, went outside to play with the dog. The adults followed, drinks in hand, enjoying the warm evening. That's when I noticed the dog-sitting family's son throwing some of my son's toys to the dog. I watched when the dog caught a small plastic dinosaur and immediately started chewing on it. The toy cracked and split. I suggested that maybe we should stick to dog toys for playing fetch, but the dog-sitting mom brushed off my concern. She told me not to worry about it, saying that dogs love all kinds of toys and it was just plastic anyway. I bit my tongue. These weren't expensive toys, just dollar store finds, but the principle bothered me. When the kid reached for my son's fire truck, I had to step in and told him we should keep that one inside since it was one of my son's favorites. The dog-sitting mom gave me a look like I was being unreasonable, but I didn't care. After about 30 minutes outside, we all headed back in for drinks and appetizers. That's when things started going downhill fast. When we were walking toward the sliding door, the dog-sitting mom opened it just wide enough for the dog to squeeze through. She announced loudly that the dog was so fast and she couldn't control him once he decided to come in. She said this almost like she was proud of it or thought it was cute. The dog immediately started sniffing around my living room, and I noticed my wife tense up. A few minutes later, the dog wandered back outside on its own, so I closed the sliding door and turned on the air conditioning. About an hour later, the dog-sitting dad made another request. He told us that he thought the dog was getting bored out there by himself and suggested that we move our conversation to the backyard so the dog could have some company. I really didn't want to, but again, I didn't want to seem like a difficult host. We all moved back outside, but the problems only got worse. The 9-year-old kept running back and forth, opening the sliding door to let the dog in and out. Every time I closed it, he'd open it again within minutes. I asked the kid if we could try to keep the door closed since the air conditioning was running, but the dog-sitting mom dismissed my concern. She told me that her son was just excited about the dog and not to worry about it. Don't worry about it? It was my house and my electric bill, but apparently my concerns didn't matter. When dinner time came around, we all moved back inside. The dog-sitting kid immediately started his routine again, complaining that the dog looked lonely out there and asking if they could let him come inside. His mom told him to finish his food first, and then she'd see about it. Of course, when the kid finished eating, she opened the door and let the dog in. The animal immediately jumped onto my couch, leaving muddy paw prints on the cushions. Then it started jumping from the couch to the coffee table and back again. I suggested that maybe we should keep the dog on the floor, but the dog-sitting dad brushed me off. He said the dog was just playing and would settle down in a minute. But the dog didn't settle down. It kept jumping on furniture, knocking over drinks, and generally making a mess. I was beyond frustrated at this point, just counting the minutes until they would leave. Then came the moment that made everything worth it. Near the end of the evening, our other friend went out to his car to grab something he'd forgotten. The dog-sitting mom, without asking anyone or even announcing what she was doing, opened the front door and let the dog run into the front yard without a leash. She called out that the dog needed some fresh air because the backyard was getting boring for him. I watched her just let someone else's dog run loose in my front yard, in a neighborhood where people walk their dogs regularly. Sure enough, within 2 minutes, a man walking his small terrier came down the sidewalk. The unleashed dog immediately started barking aggressively and charged toward the man and his dog. The man had to jump back and shout to scare the dog away. He yelled at the dog-sitting mom to control her dog and told her that the animal needed to be on a leash. The dog-sitting mom apologized and said the dog was usually friendly, but the pedestrian wasn't having it. He told her he didn't care how friendly the dog usually was, and that she couldn't just let dogs run loose like that. He said the dog could have hurt his dog. The man was clearly shaken up, and rightfully so. His small dog was trembling behind his legs. Almost everyone from the party had come outside to see what the commotion was about, including the 9-year-old. The kid looked embarrassed and confused. He walked over to our other friend's wife and asked why that man was yelling at his mom. The other mom gently explained that dogs need to be on leashes when they're in front yards for everyone's safety. I backed her up, telling the kid that the man wasn't trying to be mean to his mom, but was just scared for his dog's safety. I explained that when a big dog runs at a little dog like that, it can be really dangerous. The kid nodded slowly, processing this information. Then, in the way that only children can, he walked back to his mother with perfect innocence and brutal honesty. He asked his mom why she had opened the door without putting the leash on the dog first, pointing out that it was kind of careless. You could have heard a pin drop. The dog-sitting mom's face turned bright red when she realized that not only had a stranger called her out for her poor judgment, but now her own son was questioning her decision in front of everyone. She quickly grabbed the dog and clipped the leash back on without saying a word. The dog-sitting dad mumbled something about it getting late and started gathering their things. Within 10 minutes, they were out the door with barely a thank you for hosting. After they left, my wife and I spent an hour cleaning muddy paw prints off our furniture and picking up the pieces of broken toys from the backyard. Our other friends helped and apologized for how the evening had turned out. One of them said they couldn't believe how the dog-sitting family had just taken over our house like that. The other mentioned how crazy it was that they let the dog run loose in the front yard. The funny thing is, I heard they decided not to adopt a dog after all. Apparently, the month of dog sitting was more challenging than they expected. I can't say I'm surprised. And now we have reached the end of today's stories. Thank you for watching, and see you next time.